Let us get an overview of lambda functions. A lambda function is a function which does not have name associated with it. In some programming languages, lambda functions are also known as anonymous functions. If you are familiar with AWS, don't get confused Python lambda functions with AWS lambda functions. They are significantly different. When it comes to Python lambda functions start with keyword lambda. Typically, we have simple one-liners as part of lambda functions. There are few restrictions while passing or creating lambda functions. You cannot have return statement as part of the lambda function. Whatever is the last piece of code, that will be returned automatically. Assignment operations are also not allowed as part of the lambda functions. Use lambda functions only when the functionality is simple and not used very often. It has to be functionality here, not function. This is how a typical function look like, which can accept other functions. You can see that third argument is nothing but a function and it is being used here. We have seen this earlier. If you want to invoke this mysum function with a named function, it will look like this. You have to pre-create the function. In this case, I have pre-created function I, which takes one argument and its name is n, and I'm just returning whatever is passed here. This is how you can invoke the function which is named. So I is a named function. On top of lower bound and upper bound, I passed the I also here. And you can see that the function is invoked on each and every iteration in this loop, which actually returns the value, and that value is added to total, and finally the total is returned. If you want to replicate this with lambda function, this is how it will look like. Instead of def, you have to use lambda here. There is no function name. There are no circular brackets. You can directly pass parameters like this, and then whatever is specified here will be returned. If you try to assign some value here, like n equal to 0, by breaking into multiple lines with indentation and all, it will just fail. So I'm just trying to return something here. Let me actually pass these arguments like this. 5 is one argument, 10 is another argument, and then lambda is another argument. And then I am doing this n equal to 0 and I'm trying to return n, and it will fail. It will just say invalid syntax. Even if I say return n here, it will fail. It is not allowed to specify return or use assignment operations as part of the lambda function. So keep these things in mind. That's why we can only use lambda functions for simple functionality. If the functionality is complex, then we have to create a named function and we have to invoke using the named function the way we have seen earlier. Now let me run this and you can see the result here. For getting sum of squares, earlier we have created this function def square of n, return n times n, and we have used to pass it to mysum to get sum of squares. In this case, I can replicate that using lambda function like this. I just have to say lambda n and then n times n specified as part of the body, and this will be written automatically. Now I can run this and it will give us sum of squares. Same is the case with sum of cubes. When it comes to sum of evens, this is how it look like when I use the named function even. So as part of the even function, I am passing n as argument. If n is even, then n is being returned, otherwise 0 is returned. So this is how it look like when we use named function. If you want to replicate this even as lambda function, you can specify like this. As part of the lambda function, I'm just saying n if n mod 2 equal to 0, else 0. So whatever supposed to be returned will be returned automatically, and you can see sum of evens here. You can also get sum of divisibles of 3 by just improvising on it a bit, and you should be able to get sum of divisibles by 3 between 5 and 10, which are nothing but 6 and 9, and the sum is 15. This is how you should be able to use lambda functions to invoke higher order functions. We don't need to have a named functions. However, keep in mind that the functionality should be simple and it can be expressed in one line without any assignment operation or return statement. Then you can pass it as lambda function and take care of it.